Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for on this webinar about the 2020 updates, the Wave 2 update for the Power Platform and Dynamics 365. I am Michel van den Brink. I'll be taking you through the highlights of the 2020 Wave number 2. There are so many more features than we could possibly highlight, and I encourage you to go through all the documentation and discover all of them on your own. But here is what we thought were the highlights. As always, with me is Sander van Leeuwen in the session as well. If there's any questions popping up, he'll be sure to draw my attention to that. He is also recording this session, and after this session, of course, this recording will be made available to you to watch at a later date and to share with any colleagues of yours that may have missed it or have been unable to attend it. Let's take a look at the 2020 Wave. We have two sets of release plans. That's for the Power Platform one, and there's one separately for Dynamics 365. Dynamics 365, of course, a part of the Power Platform, but it is on its own set of applications. I'll place those links in the chat as well, so we can all click on them and take a look at them as well. The general availability for Wave 2 for all of the updates is October 1st, so that's about 2 weeks ago. All of the environments that you have sitting out there in the cloud now are eligible to update. They don't necessarily update themselves automatically just yet. For the time being, it is still an opt-in procedure, but it is important that you update soon because the update window will close and eventually all environments will be updated automatically by Microsoft. If you haven't had a time to check this out yet, or if you haven't given this a test run on a sandbox or a testing environment just yet, please do that as soon as you can, probably even today or maybe on Monday, because the update is coming forced to all environments very soon. Now you still have a little bit of slack. You can still check it out. General availability means that the first features are being rolled out, generally available to everyone. That doesn't mean that all features are being rolled out. It's a wave. And the update wave means that updates are also coming in waves. The wave extends from October the 1st, which is the general available date, until the start of the next big wave, which should be in April. So the features being released might start now in October, but other features may appear during this wave reaching all the way into the next year until March. If we take a look at the release documentation, those links I've placed in the chat, this is the one for the Power Platform, and here's the one for Dynamics 365. If we take a look over here on the side to this early access features, if we take a look over there, we can see the planning and the scheduling for each of those features. So we can see for each feature, we can see when the early access is and when it has become generally available. Here we can see this one is October 1st with a little check mark. That means that this feature is released. This one, although it says October 2020, same with this one and this one, there's no check mark there, which means it's not yet been released. So even though you can, as that does have a check mark, it is not yet an actual feature for you to use in production. And that goes for a lot of functionalities. We can see several of these, or well, a lot of these actually have not yet been released. A lot of them also have, but not everything. For every individual application, if we drill down into sales here, for example, we can see that as well. We can see here what is new and what is planned. We can see the check mark shows you that a specific function has been released. Some of these things have not been released. Here we can see some functionality, for example, that isn't going to be released in preview until November. This one is coming next year, is going to be rolled out probably in March, and et cetera, et cetera. For all of these, preview documentation is always under sort of loosely based definitions. They can change over time. Only if that check mark has arrived, then it is for sure that the functionality is there. But everything else is quite fluid. So even though this says it's scheduled for October, it might be delayed due to any kind of reason that is simply at Microsoft's discretion. So I do want to give you that kind of extra information there to make sure that we all have certain expectations managed to make sure nobody is disappointed when something arrives on time. discussing new functionalities with your customers, with your end customers, always tell them that caveat as well. It's preview. It has been announced. That doesn't mean it's coming at that specific date or coming at all. Be very wary of that. Let's dive into the actual highlights. For Power Apps, we have a new functionality that integrates Power Apps better with Power BI. Previously, when you had a Power App and you wanted to integrate that with Power BI, you could only do that on certain personal levels. For model-driven apps, for example, you could create a personal dashboard that integrates with Power BI, and you could embed some small Power BI elements in your Canvas apps as well. Now, for model-driven apps specifically, a new functionality has been introduced, allowing you to embed a Power BI dashboard in a model-driven app as a system dashboard. So you can ship it with your solution as well. Let's take a quick look at that in the Power Apps portal. If I go over to my solution experience down here, make it a little bit bigger, and I'll just create a new solution to accommodate that. So I'll just call this a Power BI test. I'll pick the default publisher, which you should never do. You should always create your own publisher, but in the interest of time, let me just pick a default one. And now that that's done, if I go over to new, I can go over to dashboard, and now this option has arrived here. It's still in preview today, but it is part of Wave 2, so you can use it with a certain degree of confidence that it's going to be a part of it. Now, if I create this dashboard, it'll prompt me for the Power BI workspace and the specific Power BI dashboard that I want to embed. That might take a little while. I don't have Power BI set up in this environment, but it will prompt you about that nonetheless. It still being preview functionality, it's a great thing for you to look at, but it is something that you should wait until it becomes actually generally available, until that check mark shows up in the documentation before you start using it with your customers. A little bit too long to load, so let's skip over that for now, and let's take a look at the next feature. Before we do that, though, there's two ways you can embed a Power BI dashboard. Either you can just directly embed it, specifying a workspace and a dashboard, but that will land you in a bit of hot water when you export the solution and import it in another environment. So you would want to create a environmental variable for it, which you can do in that same experience. It will prompt you whether or not you want to link to a specific environment, or sorry, a specific workspace, or if you want to create an environmental variable. If you do that last thing, then every time you import your solution into a new environment, you will get an additional prompt when you import, specifying that, hey, this variable is a variable. You should specify a new option for that in this environment, because of course that Power BI workspace might not be available in the other environment where you're importing. Embedding still requires that the consuming party, so whoever wants to see the dashboard, has the appropriate Power BI licensing, which is either Power BI Pro, because that's the only starting license where you can consume a shared dashboard, or that's Power BI Premium capacity, which you can buy on a tenant level, and then everyone in your organization is free to share and consume any dashboard that you assign to that premium capacity. Custom components are also part of this wave, generally available, becoming generally available. Something that's already previewed today is the custom components that we can use in Canvas apps. There's an entire wealth of new custom components out there in the wild that developers have created, working for Microsoft partners such as yourself, or working for ISVs, that enrich the experience of Dynamics 365, both on the model-driven and the Canvas apps. Generally available for Canvas apps very soon as you've upgraded to Wave 2. For portals, it's not yet generally available, but a preview is coming in December of 2020. For those components, there is a dedicated community website, which is not supported by Microsoft, but I do want to point it out to you, which is pcf.gallery. That link is PCF, Power Platform Component Framework. That's what that stands for, Gallery. This is a community-driven website that shows you a lot of work that other Dynamics 365 partners and other Dynamics 365 ISVs and developers have done to give you additional neat and handy controls for your Dynamics 365 and your Power Apps experiences. Little things like this option, or a form filler or a 3D renderer or you name it, there's probably something out there for you. One of the ones that I think is very much overdue. If I go to drop down what is it called? What's called something with option set, the colorful option set. From day one, it's already been in there in the background. If you create an option set, you can specify colors on every option, but Dynamics 365 never utilized any of those options. Here is one that actually utilizes those options. Every option set can now have a color. Not necessarily something that is useful to you immediately, but hopefully that gives you an indication of the kind of capabilities that we can accomplish with custom controls or custom components. You can either build them yourself, you can have someone build them, or you can download them. Most of them are downloadable for free from that PCF gallery, the Power Platform Component Framework gallery. For Power Automate, I've put a little asterisk here. This is one of those functionalities that has been announced, but it somehow hasn't arrived yet. So that's where the little asterisk comes from. You'll notice it throughout my presentation. There's a few other things. There's supposed to be additional templating capabilities coming where you can create a Power Automate flow that you can then save as a template and share in your organization so that other people can use it. But so far, I have unfortunately not seen any of that. But there are some new UI flow capabilities, the robotic processing automation, which you can experience in the preview if you download Power Automate for the desktop, which is also a new application in preview. But that is all still early days, so I don't want to give that too much attention right now. Something that is becoming generally available in Wave 2 as soon as you upgrade is the new capabilities in AI Builder. Previously in AI Builder, you already had the capabilities of training your data set on data that sits inside of the Common Data Service. Now you'll also have the capability of training your data that doesn't sit in the Common Data Service using one of the 200, 300 plus connectors that exist in the Power Platform. So rather than always pulling things from the Common Data Service, you can have data in Excel, or you can have data in Business Central, or in any other application, maybe even in Salesforce, and you can train your set on that external data. Also becoming generally available is the capability to explicitly tag additional fields in the form processing model, where previously it will analyze the form and it will highlight the fields and you can choose the fields. If it didn't detect a field correctly, you were not able to add it on later. Now you can do that generally available. That was already available in preview, but now you can do that as well as additional form processing capabilities like supporting multiple document layouts. Previously, when you created a form processing model, it will only be able to be taught on a single layout. Now it will also be able to be taught on multiple layouts, as long as they don't differ too much, of course. It's still important that they are adhering to at least some kind of a structure, but it is capable of processing a little bit more now. There's also some new capabilities coming to AI Builder: receipt scanning, translation, and text entity transactions. Those are all pre-built models. You don't have to learn these models, or rather, those models do not have to be learned because they come pre-trained. They are already in preview, and they will go generally available as soon as you upgrade to Wave 2. Let's take a quick peek at that in the Power Platform. So over here, let me go to my AI Builder. If I go over to Build, we can see all the models. Up here, these first models, these are the trainable models. And here we have, for example, that processing that I mentioned earlier, where you can have a form uploaded, for example, an invoice. You can have that uploadable via an app, via a Power App, or via Power Automate, for example. It will automatically be scanned by the AI Builder and detect all of the values. You can extract that into the rest of your business process, support more types of models, and also if a field is not initially identified, you can just click and drag the field, select it, and then it will start learning that, oh, this value also needs to be picked up. Going a little bit down, we have our pre-trained models here, and here we can see a few still flagged in preview. The receipt processing, for example, still flagged as a preview. That's one of those new things. If we take a look at that, we can see this is a pre-trained one for just taking a picture of a receipt, and it will automatically identify all of the different things. So it will identify that Contoso is a merchant. This is an address that it will automatically identify. This is probably a phone number, which it identified based on its algorithm that it's learned. And here it's found some sort of repeating segment. So these are probably the products on the receipt, and the total here also automatically identified in varying degrees of quality, because as we all know, receipts are that thing that always get crumpled up in your pocket or in the back of your car somewhere. So this model is specifically trained to detect text and values in receipts. Very different from the form processor, which always expects a nice crisp A4 sheet of paper or any type of paper like an invoice or something like that. So those are models you can start using today. Coming a little bit later, not just available now, is part of Wave 2 technically, but it's planned to arrive a little bit later in March. Preview is coming a little bit earlier, though. We should be able to preview that a little bit sooner. Is new connectors for Power Query. Inside of our Power Automate and Canvas app experience, of course, we have a lot of different connectors. We have 200 plus connectors available. But if you're using Power Query in your data flows or in Power BI, for example, your query set was always relatively limited. At least 45 of those global connectors are now also coming to the Power Query experience in March. Hopefully, that will allow us to ingest more data from even more systems in Power BI and in the Common Data Service where we need that. The solution importing mechanism has improved as well in Wave 2. When you upload a solution into the Common Data Service, it will now detect incompatible solutions a whole lot faster because the uploading mechanism is a whole lot faster, and you will be able to detect connection references automatically. So previously you may have experienced when you have a solution with a flow in it or a Canvas app in it which has a certain connection. If you export that as a solution and you import that into another environment, then that connection will be interrupted and you'll have to open up the flow again. You'll have to connect it, you have to fix the connections and all of that. That's no longer the case. When you import a solution now, it will automatically detect the connections in there and it will let you know exactly which of those connections are missing, which ones you need. If I go over to the solution experience here, you can see if I click on import now, a little panel slides out from the side instead of that little pop-up that we used to have. And now if we go over to my downloads, which are a lot of other interesting things here, let me import this solution in here, which has a flow with a connector in it. So I click on next. It notices that everything is okay. Otherwise, a giant error message would already pop up. And then on the next screen, it will mention all of those connectors that I've used in that other environment. So in my other environment, which could be a completely different tenant or a completely different environment, I already had this flow connected up to a bunch of other connectors. And now it'll ask me, okay, well, if we've detected these 4 connectors, please create new connections for these. And it will create them for me now. And then the flow will automatically be activated. And that's especially handy because the solution I'm trying to import now is a managed solution, which will ensure that my flow will remain in a managed state, which will ensure that every time I update it, everything goes smoothly. No unmanaged layer will exist. I won't update that, actually import that now because it takes a few minutes and I don't want to keep you waiting. Let's talk about customer voice. Technically not part of Wave 2, but it is something that's coming to a cloud near you. Previously marketed as Forms Pro, which you may have been familiar with, or you may have been familiar with the predecessor of the predecessor, which is a voice of the customer, which was a completely different product that was deprecated a few years ago, about 2 years ago, which was replaced by Forms Pro. And now again, that has been replaced by a full-fledged Dynamics 365 alternative, which is Customer Voice. Customer Voice is available for everyone who already had Forms Pro or Voice of the Customer. You will be migrated automatically if you are on Forms Pro. If you're on Voice of the Customer still, you will have to do some migration yourself. Unfortunately, those will not be migrated automatically. You can access Customer Voice today if you have a subscription to Dynamics 365 that comes with Customer Voice. It's not really a SKU that you get on its own. and you can then see all of your surveys, etc. in there. This comes with full CDS integration. So just like Voice of the Customers, your surveys and questions and all of the responses and answers are all stored in the Common Data Service, so you can act and report on them using the familiar tools you already have, like your apps, your Power Apps, and of course also flows in Power Automate. If we take a look at that in the actual application, I have Customer Voice open here. We can start by creating a new project. It'll ask us to pick a nice template. We can always start from blank, but there's already some nice templates in here. For example, I just want to do a survey after some support tickets. So we've done some kind of a job for a customer. We've picked up a ticket and I want to handle some support queries. It will ask me then in which environment I want to store that. That full CDS integration will allow you to store it in any CDS environment you want. It can be in either a standard CDS environment or a Dynamics 365 CDS environment are compatible because those entities, the customer voice entities, will exist in both. If you're already using Forms Pro today, they are exactly the same entities as Forms Pro uses. They'll just be renamed on the surface. The actual entity names, the logical names, will largely remain the same, with the exception of a few additional entities appearing. So if I click on any environment, I probably shouldn't have clicked on that one because it'll take a moment to check. Then we can create a survey, add questions, add answers, add branches, and everything that you've already hopefully seen previously in Voice of the Customer or in Forms Pro. The functionality is essentially the same. Here, because I chose a template, a lot of things are already pre-filled, so we already have a few great questions in here, but I can always add new questions, a choice, a rating, etc., and all of those answers will be stored inside of the Common Data Service, so I can report on them using the tools I already have. Let's look at the rest of Dynamics 365. Let's look at what's in store for us in Wave 2. A small thing, perhaps, but a lot of older screens that still sort of rely on the old user interface are finally being refreshed to be fully compatible with the unified client, with the unified interface. For example, the duplicate detection screen, that was always one of those weird screens that was still using that look and feel of the older Dynamics applications. Finally, those refreshes are coming as well as a part of Wave 2. That's something that's not available today, as the little asterisks will tell you here, but that is something that is coming, so it's something you have to look forward to, as well as several other screens that are still in the old style will be refreshed into the new style. Visually, the difference is not that striking, but it's all about compatibility and accessibility. The older screens were not as accessible as the new ones will be, as well as these new ones are also compatible with all manner of access. So you can actually see those screens on your phone and on your tablet as well, which was not so much the case with the old screens. There's an enhanced email experience that is already being rolled out. It's available today if you've upgraded, of course, that will allow you to compose emails a lot faster when you are working in Dynamics 365, rather than going into the actual email entity. It'll open up with a small pop-up so you can start drafting your email very quickly while not losing your place in Dynamics. You can also now upload multiple files in one go, which saves you a lot of time. This is functionality that needs to be turned on though, so do be careful of that. If we go into Dynamics 365, let's go over to customer service here. I should turn that on, and that is an organizational setting. So for that, I'll have to dive into my advanced settings, unfortunately. We'll have to go back in time to that old settings screen. And that's where we have to turn it on under the email settings. Unfortunately, this is something that is not available in the actual new admin section. Hopefully that will pop up faster than I like. Otherwise, we'll just circle back to it, which I think we'll do because it's taking a little bit too long. Let's circle back to that. An improved PDF experience is also available. That doesn't have to be turned on. That turns itself on automatically. You can enjoy that right away from day one. If you already use Word templates to create beautiful mail merges of your records into documents, then you can already use this today. you can create PDFs from any kind of document really that is already as a Word template stored in Dynamics right now. It will automatically create a nice PDF view instead of a Word document, which is a very frequently asked functionality for which previously we had to rely on third-party solutions, but now finally it's a first-party experience. Coming also, and that's something that's not immediately available right now, is the ability to automatically create PDFs programmatically using an API. So that means we can actually create our own solutions that automatically create PDFs, or maybe even use an action in Power Automate to automatically create that PDF. Go over to our environment here. Let's go over to sales. We go over to a quote, for example. We'll be able to see that there. Let me open up a quote. Oh, there's no way. There's no quotes in here. That's unfortunate. I was fairly certain there were some quotes in here. Let's quickly create one. And pick a random customer and a random price list. And as soon as that's saved, you can now see here we have the PDF option available as well. In addition to, of course, the Word templates, which are still available. You can use those, but now you can also export that as a PDF. And then it'll pop up with a little experience for you to specify which template you want. And those are essentially the same templates that you have as Word experiences. Plus, you see the nice little preview of the document, and you can directly send it out as an email, or you can download it, or you can even have it saved directly to Dynamics, which is neat. This is a functionality you can turn on and off for additional entities, though. If we take a quick peek at that in the settings, so I'll switch areas over here in the bottom left over to app settings. We have our PDF option over here somewhere. Where is it? Where is it? It's PDF. Here it is. Convert to PDF. Manage. And here we can see it's turned off for pretty much all entities except for quotes and stuff. You can turn it on for any other entity that you want. So if I switch over here, no, it's only turned on quotes today, but we can turn it on any other entity that we like. So if we go back for a moment to that email experience, by now this settings has loaded, so I can show you where to turn that on. Let's go over to administration in the classic settings and then go over to system. And then on the email tab, you will find, scroll down a little bit, there's the new experience, or is it not in this screen? And let's go to enhanced. There's enhanced email timeline. That's the one you need to turn on. Multitask, compose, etc., etc. So just turn that on. And then on my customer service app, I'll just refresh my customer service app so we can take a look at what that looks like. Now let's open up a random account. And here on the timeline, if I go into the activity and click on new email now, rather than the entire screen navigating to the email entity, it'll pop up with this little window for me so I can compose an email while I continue to work in Dynamics 365 in the background. That allows me to make it so much, for it to be so much easier. Plus there's a little pop out icon as well, so I can even make it a little bit bigger if I need. Plus, we have this attach file button now, which will allow us to attach multiple files in one go, where previously you always have to save the entity, the email record first, and then use this little grid you have over here to add the attachments to your email one by one, which can be a little bit laborious. So you click on here, you click on new attachments, and you open up the file, and then you click on one, and then you add an ad. But here with attach file, you can select multiple files in one go. Let's select some demo information here, and that will upload all of those files in one go. And just like that, we have an email. So that's the enhanced email experience. Also coming in Wave 2, not directly available now, that's coming a little bit later in November, is more Teams integration, and a generally more calling integration. So in our sales application here, if we take a look at the top here, we have an up next section just above the timeline with a little call. It knows that a call has been scheduled, so there is a call button for us to directly start a call. And if you have Teams integration enabled, that will pop up a little sidebar, and it will immediately start calling out with Teams, saving you some time and some trouble to start up the actual team clients, just in case you don't have it running. For customer service, there's some improvements coming to the knowledge-based authoring. Those are available today if you upgrade to Wave 2. There's a rich text improvement where you can now embed images without uploading them first. So previously, you always had to upload the image first and then embed it in your article. Now you can upload it and embed at the same time, as well as some capabilities to expand and contract sections in your articles, and more monitoring on your actual articles. There's also some timeline improvements which are available today. You can set the activities in the timeline to expand and collapse by default. You can also now finally determine which elements are available when you click on new activity in the timeline, and you have the availability of hiding what you've missed if you don't need that functionality. Plus, there's this new app, the Customer Service Workspace, that allows you to work in a multi-session experience, which will allow you to work on multiple tickets or multiple cases at the same time, for example. Let's take a look at this new timeline first. From, since day one, really, if you click on new timeline here, it will show you all of the types of activities that are available, but now we have the experience to turn that on and off as well. We'll go back to the Maker portal for that, to Power Apps portal, and I'll jump into the entity straight away. Of course, you want to do that with a solution. Oops, let's find all entities. You always want to do your customizations in a solution, but I'm just showing you the functionality now, so please forgive me for not using a solution. We'll go over to Forms, and let's open the case form in the new editor. Now, this only works in the new editor. Please don't open this form in the classic editor. That won't work, unfortunately. Much like a lot of things will only work in the new editor. And as soon as that has loaded, we can click on the timeline to edit its properties. There we go. Here we can see those options that we previously already had in the classic experience. So showing activities, notes, and posts. So this is where you could turn off posts and notes, for example, if you don't want to use those. We find that not a lot of people want to use posts, so it's a great location for you to turn off. And now here as well, we can show and hide specific types of activity, which we previously couldn't do before. That's something we can do now. The Customer Service Workspace is a completely separate app that you can use. So we go over to our Customer Service app. This is our regular Customer Service app, but there's also another one, which is called the Customer Service Workspace. And it looks very empty, but that's because it's really targeted at this multi-session type of situation. You start off with your dashboards where you hopefully have some open cases. And for every time you want to start a new session, you can shift click an element. So I'll press and hold the shift key on my keyboard, and you can see now a new session has started. So I can open up multiple at the same time, have multiple calls going at the same time, for example, and even in all of those sessions, I can open up new tabs. So here, let's open up a case. I want to open up a specific case. I want to look up a case. So let's say active cases. I want to see this case while I'm working on this particular activity, for example, working for a particular type of customer. I can switch back and forth, so I never really lose my place, which can be extremely handy when you're working with a lot of customers at the same time in a customer service scenario. If you're using the omni-channel customer service experience and you have integration with your phone and or your chat system, a new session can automatically be created when a new phone call comes in or when a new chat session comes in. So you're automatically prompted here by the new session appearing and a little notification, of course, that you have this new session. In your new session, the customer card will automatically be prompted as well of the customer that is calling you. Also coming in Wave 2, which is something you'll only find in the omnichannel and in the new multi-session experience, is the so-called smart assistant that will help you based on some artificial intelligence to solve issues faster by surfacing knowledge-based articles automatically and surfacing additional cases that seem like they're similar, or surfacing additional materials that could help you resolve your case a little bit better. So that's those AI suggestions which are coming. They're available today, but they do take a little bit of time to train. They will use contextual information of the current case you're working on, the current chat session you're working on, the previous emails attached to this case, and they will use that to find similar cases and also suggest knowledge-based articles that may resolve the case faster. So that is available to us here. On this side panel, we see a little light bulb. If I open that up, I'll open up my smart assistant, and that will hopefully give me some suggestions. This is a relatively new environment with not that much data, so it has no suggestions for me right now. When moving to the unified interface, one thing that's very important is that we move some things along with us. As we hopefully all know, the unified interface is going to be the only way to stay. The current legacy web client is deprecated and in fact obsolete. On December the 1st, it's being turned off for everyone. So please migrate now. Some of the things will not automatically migrate. For example, in customer service, we have automatic entity creation rules, and we have SLA rules and things like that. Those are all experiences that rely on workflows, on classic workflows. They will have to be upgraded to the unified interface as well. They won't stop working on December the 1st, but you won't be able to adjust them anymore. You won't be able to modify them anymore. If you were on the webinar, on the last webinar, that's where we went through the customer service application and through this migration process in great detail. So please do view the recording of last webinar if you want more information about that. But I can show you very briefly where that migration is. If we go into our customer service app, we switch areas over to the service management section. We scroll all the way down. We have this ARC and SLA migration option here. ARC standing for automatic case or automatic record creation, sorry. Previously, it was called automatic case creation. Now it's called automatic record creation. ARC and SLA migration, because those rules, if you've previously created them in the legacy web client, you won't be able to edit those anymore after December the 1st. So you will need to migrate them to the new versions so that you can edit them again. They will migrate your workflows to Power Automate flows, essentially, and then you'll be able to edit everything again. So if you have a customer using anything like this, using the SLA or using the automatic record creation rules, do make sure to do this with them before December the 1st. For field service, there are some updates as well. I was not able to validate any of these updates, unfortunately, because I couldn't see them in my preview instances, but it doesn't mean that they're not coming. It just means that they might be coming a little bit later. Voice of the customer integration is included with field service, where when a work order is completed, you can automatically send out a survey with customer voice. There's going to be a new dashboard introduced where we can see the total estimated duration for work when people were first arrived, and all sorts of other metrics surrounding the work orders. And for the many areas in field service where you have records inside of records inside of records, on a work order you have work order lines, and behind that work order there are templates and there's products, and there's a lot of depth to field service. For many of those scenarios, Dynamics will now start opening those records in pop-ups rather than actually opening the record immediately if you go through a subgrid. So if on a work order, you open up a service line and you want to open up the product behind the service line, it will open up in a little pop-up window instead of opening up the entire record and you losing your place. Much like that email experience we saw, you don't lose your place, you stay in the work order, but that record just opens up in a little side pop-up. For Dynamics 365 Field Service, there's also a new metric coming for the time travel, where the predictive Time travel will start to take into consideration historic data of the environment itself as well. So if it notices that the start time and the arrival time of certain work orders to certain locations deviate by its normal predictions, it will start to reevaluate all of its predictions. Plus, something that's already available today is a unified interface refresh of the work hours, which was previously still a very old screen, borrowed from CRM 4, to be honest, and that has been refreshed into a new screen now as well, so you can edit the work hours with confidence through the unified interface. There's also some updates for the field service app, but I was unfortunately not able to validate those. New push notifications are coming, so we can update our technicians who are in the field of things going on, important updates, important changes, schedules being mixed up, or bookings being canceled, as well as an option for the technicians to share their location real time with geofencing. So not all the time, but only in certain areas, and more options to customize reporting, plus offline enhancements, where the new app will default to offline, where previously the app will default to online. It assumes that when you start up the app, you're online, you synchronize, and then maybe you go offline later. This one will assume you start out offline and will only synchronize when things are available, which makes it that much more interesting for people to work with, because the app will essentially be a lot more stable because it won't prompt you to go online all the time. Also, in preview now, which will go GA, is a new functionality in field service, which is called inspections, which is essentially very similar to a survey in customer voice, but this is something that's completely embedded inside of field service, which is sort of a checklist. If you go to a work site to do an inspection, you probably have certain points you have to go through, certain steps you have to go through, and this is where inspections comes through. You can associate an inspection with a work order, and then when you open that work order in the field service app, you will be able to go through that checklist, go through all of those inspection steps with a little instruction next to it, what you should do, where you should check, what you should verify, and then you can tick them off one by one through the app. That's a preview experience still now, but that will go in general availability throughout Wave 2. That's something, if you want to preview it, you can do that today. Also, for field service, much like for customer service, those existing workflows in the background, they will be migrated to Power Automate. This is something you don't have to do by yourself, though. For field service, they will be migrated automatically because they're fairly straightforward when compared to the customer service elements. Here, it's mainly the workflows that renew contracts automatically. Dynamics 365 marketing, there's going to be in-place editing for pretty much everything, much like that in-place email editor that we saw for customer service. Here as well, if you edit an email or something like that, it will open up a pop-up to edit so you don't lose your place in the customer journey, for example. If you have the customer journey open and you click on an email template to edit it, it's very annoying that it moves to the next screen and you have to go back to the customer journey later, losing your place essentially. That's something they've taken care of now as well. It will open up in a little pop-up. As the asterisk denotes, not something that's available today, but it's something you can try out in preview, and it's coming throughout Wave 2. As well as a new customer journey that looks a little bit different and offers you some additional options as well. That is coming a little bit later in preview. Although it says preview in September, that is true. The preview starts in September, meaning it will be rolled out a little bit later. Also included in the new experience, if you're using an event manager for marketing, you'll be able to quickly create a Microsoft Teams session as well, or mapping the existing events that you have to new events if you want. For forms, if you want to create forms, you can now also map those to all entities rather than only to leads and contacts, which was previously sort of the restriction. Quick note about Business Central. That's the last point I have for you with 32 seconds on the clock. For Business Central, coming in Wave 2 is a preview functionality where Business Central tables can be visible inside of the Common Data Service as virtual tables. So if you do have that winning combination of Dynamics 365 for sales, for your sales front end and you use Business Central for your finance back end, you can now surface the financial information, the product catalog, and all of the finance data from Business Central inside of Dynamics 365 for sales as a virtual entity. So you can see all of that data from Business Central directly inside of Dynamics 365, inside of the sales application, or any other Power App for that matter, because this is a common data service integration. So it applies to all common data service apps. It applies to Dynamics 365, of course, but it also applies to any custom app that you may have created. So all of your Power Apps, where previously you've had to rely on the Business Central connector, which, let's be honest, it wasn't the greatest connector because there are a lot of limitations there, but now you will be able to service any table you've turned on in Business Central for this functionality to be serviced as a virtual entity inside of the common data service. That's also something that's coming that's not available today, but you can start previewing it. With that, that's my last point. I realized I went quite fast, but there was a lot to cover in only 45 minutes. This is all I have, though. So if there are any questions, this would be a great time to ask them.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michel. Although I don't think we have any questions until now. So, indeed, I have to say it was a very big topic, and I think you did a great job to cover these in the 45 minutes. Well, yeah, okay. Well, let's look for the wave 2 for the coming periods, and hopefully we see each other next time again. Thank you so much for joining, and have a great weekend. Bye bye.
Indeed. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.